large number of people who are waiting for today's show to begin, I think it's safe to assume that a lot of folks want to hear your input, sir, on this truly strange death of Jeffrey Epstein. How are you today, Larry?
Hanging on. It's tricky weather here. We are under incredible humidity, which is the worst thing for me, but I'm fine. I'm making it.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, yeah,
Thank you
everyone's
for asking.
hoping you're going to be all right there. And I think our regular viewers are aware that you're in Conway, Arkansas. Of course, people might say, hey, Larry's worried about his health, high heat there in Arkansas during the summer. Why doesn't he just move? Not that easily done. Obviously, a lot of financial burden on all of us. Anyone who wants to financially sponsor Larry can go to nicholslive.com. And if you click on the donate tab, that's going to bring you right to all of his payment sponsorship information. You can use PayPal and his PayPal address of nicholslive@aol.com, or simply stick a few greenbacks in an envelope and send them over to Larry in Conway. Larry, there's probably not, other than Bill Clinton himself, maybe a few other people, there's probably not too many who are more familiar with the tactic, the techniques, and the hallmarks of the so-called Arkancide than you. You can spot these things from a mile away, isn't that right?
Pretty much. I do want to add one thing that we have missed over all the time I've been on with you.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to check whether I qualify to make these comments, I would remind people, and I doubt many of your audience have Bill Clinton's memoirs, but if you look in Bill Clinton's memoirs, he mentions me 2 or 3 times. Now, I say that simply because of all the people, Jason, that you know claim to have done all these great things and revealing stuff about Clinton during his administration and before. You know, they're not in there.
Right.
The name that is in there is mine.
You're talking about the book,
So,
My
folks,
Life by Bill Clinton, right?
Yes. Now, he didn't write good about me, but that's good. I don't want him to write good about me. I want him to write bad. But that should prove to y'all, not from my words or Jason's words, but that's from Bill Clinton's words, that I was there and involved in a great deal of the things that haunted him all the way through his presidency. Now, back to the Arkancides.
Yeah.
There are simple rules that qualify for an Arkancide. Number one, the person has to die a mysterious death. For example, one of the people that I had that was going to testify in Arkansas shot himself somehow in the back of the head twice, and it was ruled a suicide. Probably the most famous one was the person I was working with on the documents that he had relative to the Clintons and their involvement with Whitewater with Jim McDougal. This guy in Saline County, he cut his hands and feet off, cut his brainstem in his neck, severed the brainstem,
Whoa.
set himself on fire, and threw himself in a dump.
That was Jim
And that
McDougal?
death was, no, it wasn't Jim McDougal. It was a guy that was testifying for me against them. And that guy, they ruled committed suicide. Now,
Wow.
folks, how you cut your hands and feet off, cut your neck, cut your head basically off to the brain, sever the brain stem, throw gas on yourself and throw yourself in a dump and set yourself on fire. How you can pull that one is beyond belief, but it is on the record in Arkansas as a suicide. The next day, he was to testify against Hillary and Bill for their involvement with Whitewater, which would have been totally damning, but it ended when he died. Now, that brings us to the next part. In an Arkancide, you have to look and see who is the person or who benefits from the death of a person. Now, as in the case with the guy that set himself on fire and did all that stuff to himself, obviously the people that benefited was Bill and Hillary having to do with their whitewater. In the case of Epstein, one of the signature problems with that case was Bill Clinton on the plane that we know about 26 times. But even beyond Bill Clinton, Epstein had let's call it a black book with some of the most powerful, influential people in the country and the world for that matter. And he had vowed that if he went down, he would bring everybody with him. And he shouldn't have done that. He shouldn't have said that. You know, I had been for some time, Jason, saying that Epstein would get out of this case.
Uh-huh.
I knew that if he did end up going to court, that it would be rigged and he would walk away. There's only two ways to resolve this case. One is rigging the court and letting him walk, and the other is to have him die. Now,
Yeah.
I think we can look at, and I'm not trying to stir up or create any kind of wild, crazy conspiracy here, but I think we can all agree from what's been publicly said that the situation around his death having to do with the prison, having to do with, you know, he was supposed to be checked every 30 minutes and he wasn't checked for hours. All of it makes very little, if any, sense, especially for a high-profile prisoner. So, in my mind, and this is my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, that's all it is, my opinion, there is no doubt to me that this man was killed in the interest of silencing not only what he could bring against Bill Clinton, but obviously others. Now, I am informed, very closely informed, that Barr and Durham plan to proceed to investigate the weird things having to do with his death. And Barr has sworn that he's going to get to the bottom of it. I hope he does.
Do you believe
but
that?
Let me say,
He will,
I
Larry?
doubt it.
You doubt it?
I believe he will try, yes. I believe he will try. But I do not believe he will get anywhere.
Why do you think that? Who's going to stop him? He's the Attorney General.
He's the Attorney General, but you have to understand the people involved with Epstein, the people that have so much to lose, are probably the most powerful people, Jason, in the world.
Yeah.
These guys are powerful, and they have the ability to cover up things that the average citizen or even above average citizen would have no way of doing. You know, you've got people that they can pay, just as an example, they have the power and the money to, number one, pay someone to take a fall. Number two, if they did kill Epstein, then if you're one of the people involved, you know very clearly that if you cross them, they'll kill you as well. So almost all of the trails that would lead to getting to the bottom of it are going to be sealed, even from the Attorney General. And remember, no matter how straight Barr is or Durham, no matter how good a job they're trying to do, they don't actually do the day-to-day grunt work. It goes to staff below them, prosecutors, FBI investigators, etc. And we already know that those groups are penetrated by people that are a part of this coup in the first place. So there's every opportunity in the world to seal off being able to get to the true answers to what happened.
Yeah.
Now, that's my opinion.
Now,
But
Larry,
I hope
there's...
we see.
Sorry.
Uh-huh.
I was going to say, there's a lot of people in the comments who have a number of questions. So the first thing I want to get to is when they were doing this in Arkansas, because Arkancide has now gone nationwide or perhaps international. Right. It has a long time ago with the death of Ron Brown. But a major player who you and I have spoken about, and somebody who I found out about even before I had the chance to meet you, was this guy, Fahmy Malak, who was the medical examiner. Right. He died in 2018. This guy was a major gatekeeper, goaltender, whatever you want to call him, in terms of determining that all of these bizarre, I mean, I think for the most part, people who are going to kill themselves either take sleeping pills and a bunch of booze, jump off a building, jump in front of a train, or do something crazy in front of the cops to try to get themselves shot. They generally don't want to torture themselves and burn themselves up and chop off things on their body. That doesn't seem like something somebody would do.
Well, actually, no. And then there was a case with a lady I was working with, Kathy Ferguson.
Uh-huh.
She had been, she had been attacked by Bill Clinton in the governor's mansion. She was a nanny for Chelsea in the governor's mansion. And I had finally got her to where she was going to talk. Well, as it turned out, she was going to go on with Pastor Ernie Sanders on his program and break her story. This was on a Friday. She was supposed to do the program. She called me and said she just wanted to wait and she would do it following Monday. I begged her not to do it. I even had Pastor Sanders call her and beg her to not do that. And by the way, if you don't believe me, you can call him. He'll verify all of this. And now, that was on Friday. On Saturday, she was dead. And supposedly she took her own life, shot herself in the head. Now, guys, Kathy was very petite, very pretty, and she was very vain. I mean, she was not the kind of person that if she was going to kill herself, would do it in such a violent way. So, plus she had prescription, had a whole bottle of sleeping pills because her nerves were a wreck. I went and investigated after she died. I didn't believe it. Chris Ruddy, who at the time was with the Pittsburgh Tribune, he had not yet started his Newsmax.
Right.
We went to the apartment complex. Now, this actually happened, folks. We went to the apartment complex where she supposedly killed herself. This was like on a Tuesday or Wednesday the following week, that close. When we broke in to the apartment, the police had it sealed off. It had been ruled a suicide. Now, one thing Bill Clinton did, before he ran for president, he had the Arkansas legislature pass a law. This literally happened. He had a legislature pass a law that if somebody was ruled to have committed suicide, the case was sealed from anyone being able to access it. Anyone, even the federal government, they tested it and couldn't penetrate it.
What's the justification for that?
Don't have a clue. They just did. So obviously, Fahmy Malak, who, by the way, the reason he became medical examiner, he covered up for Virginia when she was a nurse anesthesiologist working in Hot Springs, and somehow she ended up helping and they killed a patient. And it was Fahmy Malak that doctored the records to get her off where she had no problem with it. So because of that, Bill Clinton appointed him permanently the medical examiner for the state of Arkansas. And then anybody that committed suicide, no matter how bizarre or weird it sounded, it had to go through him. And when he ruled suicide, the case was instantly sealed. So when Kathy Ferguson was ruled suicide, by the way, just virtually overnight, it was stamped suicide, sealed, it was over. Mm-hmm. When Chris Ruddy and I went in, several things we noticed. Number one, She supposedly took a 380 semi-automatic pistol, stuck it to her right temple, and the bullet exited her left temple. Now, have you got that pictured in your mind, right?
Yes.
She was sitting on the couch. We're looking at the couch that she's sitting on, and the couch is still blood-stained, still even moist with the blood. To the left, now imagine her looking straight forward, sitting on a couch. To her left was a wall, a paneled wall between the living room and the kitchen part of the apartment. To the right was this big plate glass window that, opened up to the center of the apartment complex. So now let me ask you this. With the wall being to the left, the plate glass window being to the right, if you took the pistol and shot yourself in the right temple, the bullet exited the left temple, where would you find the bullet?
Probably outside the window, no?
No. Remember, looking straight ahead, the window was to the right, the paneled wall was to the left.
The bullet would
She
be in the
stuck
wall.
The pistol, be in the wall.
Yeah.
Well, we looked at the wall, and guess what?
No bullet.
No bullet hole. Now, I look around, and surprisingly, I found something. Up in the ceiling, about 3 feet in front, or maybe 4, in front of the couch, guess what we found?
What?
A bullet hole with the bullet still in it.
Oh. But, so what
Now,
happened?
Remember that. Well, remember that. We actually talked to this black girl that lived next door.
Uh-huh.
We asked her, had she talked to the police? She said no, they never asked her any questions or said anything to her. Well, we asked, do you know what happened? She said, no, all I know is that I heard a big thump, and then it was like people falling up and down the staircase. It was a 2-story apartment, and the staircase was right next to her staircase, divided only by the wall.
Right.
And she could hear people running up and down the staircase. They run up and down the staircase, and then she hears a loud pop.
Huh. Sounds
Now,
like somebody was
remember
doing
what
something there, Larry.
Yes. So then, when I go to the mortuary, I meet her friends that were nurses. And her friends, the nurses, told us that they were scared to death. I said, what about? And they said, well, when they went to the to the funeral home, they got there before the family did. Mm-hmm. And they looked at the body. Well, the mortician had done a terrible job with the makeup. So they asked the mortician, told them who they were and what they did, and they asked, could they please, before the parents got there, put her makeup on the way she would want? And he said, of course. So when they started doing the makeup, now these nurses all worked in trauma in the ER. Mm-hmm. Familiar with gunshot wounds.
Right.
When they started doing the makeup, they noticed that her right forehead, right above her right eye, that there was a hole that they had filled with this cake,
pancake
powder
makeup.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yes. And it was about the size, they said, it was about 1.5 to 2 inches, virtually round.
Whew.
Back
Large
behind
caliber.
back behind her left ear, they said was funny. I said, what do you mean funny? And they said, well, right behind the left ear, down about 1/2 inch from the earlobe, was a hole about the size, they said, of a number 2 pencil.
So that's kind of small.
Now, a 380 round bullet, diameter-wise, is about that size. So what I believe, my opinion, what I believe happened, somebody grabbed her by the hair. She was either sitting on the couch or they yanked her up, stuck a pistol behind her left ear, and shot. The bullet exited the right forehead and ended up in the ceiling 3 or 4 feet in front of the couch.
Huh.
That girl was killed. Well, what was the deal with the running up and down the stairs? They thought her boyfriend, at the time, they thought her boyfriend was asleep upstairs. He was a North Little Rock or a Sheridan, he was a police officer.
And she's the ex-wife of a state trooper, isn't she?
Yes, Danny Ferguson was her ex-husband, yes.
Right.
But she was dating this guy. They obviously ran upstairs thinking he was upstairs in the bed, but he wasn't. He had gone off partying that night, and they didn't know it. So they run upstairs, see if he's up there. He's not. Then they come back down, and they whacked her. Now, it's all pretty obvious. It's certainly something that should have been investigated, but the police never talked to the girl next door. They didn't survey the apartment because we found the bullet. Anybody could have found it. And by the way, there was an ashtray on the coffee table in front of the couch. Mm-hmm. And inside that ashtray, on that coffee table, was the cartridge that had been ejected from the pistol.
Sounds like a lot of evidence, Larry.
You bet. And nobody checked it. And the police wouldn't take anything. They wouldn't even talk to us about it. As a matter of fact, they threatened to arrest me and Chris.
Wow.
Because it was sealed and nothing you can do. And then I had to tell the parents. I had to tell the father. And by the way...
Why did you have to tell them?
Well, nobody else would.
What did you tell him, and what did he say?
I told him just what I told you.
What was his reaction?
I had to. He said, can you find out who did it? And I did. I tried. I never did find out, but I tried. Until one day, after her boyfriend was murdered, they asked me not to ever call him again.
The boyfriend was murdered?
Matter of fact, about a week or so later, he was found at her grave, laying face up, and supposedly he had shot himself in the head, in the back of the head, by the way. Now, supposedly he got on his knees in front of the grave, stuck the pistol to the back of his head, shot, but somehow he was found on top of the grave like he was doing a side straddle hop, looking straight up. Now, how did that happen? And of course, it was ruled a suicide, case closed.
Wow. It's very difficult
now, Jason, this is just one.
Yeah.
This is just one.
Yeah. It's real difficult to find information about this. LA Times, Larry, oddly has a lot of information about the stuff you tell us about. There must have been someone or multiple someones at the LA Times who were interested in this, but
Bill Rimple. They had an entire floor of the Little Rock Holiday Inn downtown on Broadway. They had a whole floor where they had gathered all this different evidence, all these different records, everything about Clinton. I worked with them closely. As a matter of fact, Bill Rimple was with me when I was in my van, and I pulled up in front of the governor's mansion. Unfortunately, it was after he had made it to he had made the cut in the primary, and I had bugged the governor's mansion. Rimple didn't believe me. And I said, well, come on. So we went one morning, we get in front of the governor's mansion right outside the front, and I turn on the radio, and lo and behold, you could hear all the different mics that I had placed around the guard shack and the governor's quarters. And unfortunately, we were immediately surrounded by Secret Service. I had failed to realize that Secret Service had taken over security at that point. And we nearly got put in the slammer.
Wow. It's amazing the power that these guys have to cover this stuff up. We're getting a flood of questions and comments in the chat here, Larry. So a lot of people are saying that they feel that Jeffrey Epstein may not be dead. And before you answer that, I just want to show everyone this array of photographs that has recently been tweeted. I observed this myself immediately, that this photo the New York Post published of the allegedly dead Jeffrey Epstein, admittedly, it looks like Jeffrey Epstein in the general sense. The hair color, the hairline, at least a portion of it that's visible looks like him. I noticed right away, however, that the photo of the dead guy has a really noticeable curve to his nose that Mr. Epstein seems to not have. Epstein has such a remarkably straight nose, it causes me to wonder if he has had plastic surgery possibly. But of course, this photo of him allegedly dead is the most recent photo, and I can't imagine someone would have plastic surgery to make their nose bigger and more rounded looking. It doesn't seem like the type of thing that somebody would do. What do you say to that, Larry? Could this be a fake death designed to get Epstein to escape to freedom or get him into a witness protection program?
Let me just deal with this nuts up. I cannot tell who I've talked to. You know who I've talked to virtually, right? You know the people I'm talking to.
Some people.
And I assure you, I have had it confirmed. No doubt, Epstein is dead. He is dead. Now, I don't know how they get the pictures on the internet. I don't know how the people twiddle with stuff. The problem with the internet today, as you know, Jason, you really can't trust anything. I mean, They can Photoshop and make things look like you can't imagine. Then when you have minds that mentally think something, you're capable of seeing things that maybe you shouldn't or wouldn't see. But my personal belief, based off of my inquiries, Epstein is dead. And I assure you that Attorney General Barr, along with, what's his name? Durham, they would not engage in publicizing the depth at which they intend to investigate his death and the oddities around it. They wouldn't do that if there was the remote possibility that he wasn't. And if they had put him in witness protection, I assure you, you would not see the Attorney General
saying anything.
You wouldn't, right. They wouldn't be going further with the investigation. They would
just
not
say no comment or something like that.
You know, that, or they'd break into some routine, but there would not be the emphasis, I guess is what I'm trying to say, on the fact that they intend to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. People, Larry, are suggesting that possibly the body that was shown in the New York Post was that of Anthony Bourdain. I do not agree with that at all for several reasons. I'm showing an image of Anthony Bourdain in profile right now. First of all, the guy's been dead for, I don't know, months, almost a year, if not a year. I don't think it's reasonable to presume that they'd keep him around, preserved, to throw him on a gurney. What would be the purpose of doing that? But even more importantly, as we just evaluate these two pictures, I do not believe they even look the same. Bourdain's nose looks different, the nostrils look different, the tip of his lips look different, the ridge of his eyebrow looks different. This is clearly two different men. I agree with what you're saying, Larry, that it's easy to fake photographs. It's easy to, I mean, this is a dead guy taken from a blown up photograph far away. It could be a rubber suit on that gurney, and there's ways that we could be tricked by that. But obviously your information and the people that you've spoken to have suggested that he's dead. I also think that, when we evaluate, in totality, kind of the treatment that Donald Trump has received since being inaugurated, I think even people who dislike President Trump would agree that the mainstream in politics, certainly the intelligence agencies, do not seem to be on the side of Donald Trump. And I have a feeling if Jeffrey Epstein had material or testimony or evidence that would be damaging to Donald Trump, I think they would have made sure that he stayed alive to testify. And the fact that he's dead, I think, is just further indication that perhaps Donald Trump's administration is not in full control of our intelligence agencies, or certainly rogue elements within the government or criminal elements that are able to do this kind of thing.
I would have to agree with that 100%. I mean, look, this is a coup attempt from some of the highest placed people in the FBI, CIA, NSA. Jason, you don't get higher people than the ones involved in this coup attempt. You just don't. They don't like Trump.
Right.
And anything they could hang in any way on President Trump, they would use it. And I think this is a case where whatever President Trump's problems are with his promiscuousness, whatever, he obviously, apparently, was not involved in pedophilia. And so he's not a member of the cast of characters involved. But
I believe, Larry, sorry to interject, but I believe that there's testimony that came out in this Epstein document dump just a few days prior to his death, in which the witnesses say they saw Donald Trump at certain events and parties, but he never engaged in sex with any of them.
Yes. And I truly believe that some of the names that are involved with his black book or his list are some of the most influential people in our Congress. I'm not going to say a name. Of course, I would not say the name Adam Schiff, but, some of the people that are influential happen to be in that book. And they do have the power. They do have the wherewithal to make serious things happen. And I assure you, at that prison, whacking somebody would not be as complicated as one would think. You just have to have the wherewithal and the ability and the guts to pull it off.
Yeah, and certainly Adam Schiff has been linked to Ed Buck, who has engaged in activities that have involved, substantially younger than him, male prostitutes dying of meth overdoses in his home, and there's been remarkably little investigation into that. There's a lot of confusing reporting, Larry. There's very few photographs of Jeffrey Epstein actually with Bill Clinton. There's this one that I'm showing right now, which has been alleged to be Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein in the White House. I tend to doubt that, though, because as I look at the photograph, they appear to be in a very confined space. I'm looking at this wall behind Bill Clinton, and it's got a curve to it that makes me think they are inside an airplane. This curved wall seems to match the fuselage of an airplane, and we know that these guys liked to hang out on airplanes together. James Patterson's book about Jeffrey Epstein, called Filthy Rich, describes that his Boeing 727 trijet, a 50-year-old aircraft, to me that seems like a remarkably old aircraft to continue operating, and other pilots have confirmed with me that they consider that to be an extremely old aircraft. We've heard from James Patterson in that book, Filthy Rich, that the aircraft had a trading floor on it. And he didn't go into too much detail, but in my view, that would indicate high-speed air-to-ground telecommunications, high-powered computers. We don't know what they might have had on that plane in terms of technology, but very limited information coming out, and certainly the Clintons prefer to have witnesses dead.
It is just, yeah, it's just a way of life. It's just a way of life at that level. You know, we're talking about a game that most of us, regular people, can't even imagine, Jason. We can't. We can't imagine the money. We can't imagine the power that money can buy. You know, in Washington, it's all about influence, and influence is power. And Epstein, I assure you, long ago tapped into that influence and that power. And so he could bring people down that they're not going to go down easy. They will not go down easy.
No.
It brings to mind when him saying he would, if he went down, he'd bring them all down. That brings to mind Ron Brown. You know,
Exactly.
Ron Brown said, you know, he said on a Sunday that, you know, if he went, he and his family were not going down. If they went down, they were all going down. And Ron Brown was involved with Don Tyson and the Alaskan fisheries deal, and a lot of people would have been hurt very bad. You know about the Alaskan fisheries.
You
right?
told me about that, but of course Ron Brown was involved in a lot of things. We had an interview a week or two ago with Jack Cashel and Larry Klayman, who were both very involved in the information surrounding Ron Brown prior to his death. A lot of questions about that. And you know, Larry, the comments are bringing up all kinds of different people who are alleged Arkancide victims. What do we know about Jeremy Michael Borda? He was a United States Navy admiral, and he's notable for being the first American sailor to have risen through the enlisted ranks to become a chief of naval operations. Do you know anything about him?
Do not, or at least not that I can recall.
Well, he died at the age of 56 in Washington, D.C. I've never heard of this guy either, but this is a name that was just posted in the comments here. I'm not sure how he died or what. It says he died on May 16th in the garden outside his home at the Washington Navy Yard. Reportedly left 2 typed and unsigned suicide notes in his home. That seems to be a hallmark of Arkancide as well. These typed, unsigned suicide notes.
You know, I remember Vince Foster.
Exactly.
I remember well Vince Foster when, you know, they went through his briefcase. They found nothing. His leather briefcase, accordion type briefcase, it was in the car. Now I've got the actual police, I've got the Park Police report to the Secret Service there at the White House. And in that report, they state that they found Vince Foster in his car in Fort Marcy Park. And there was a .38 caliber revolver in the seat. There was a 6-pack of Bartle and James. One had been opened. And in the back seat, there in the back seat floorboard behind the driver was the accordion briefcase. And they checked it out, and it was completely empty. Now, 2 days later, the FBI goes through and ransacks the office of Vince Foster, and guess what? There they find that same briefcase. It's there now. Well, because of all of this, I had broken the story about the notification from the Park Police to the Secret Service, and it had started getting kind of a stir going about the strangeness of the death. And then all of a sudden, the next day, they come back into his office. They find the briefcase. This time they simply turn it upside down, and out of it falls this torn up suicide note. Again, that has no signature. There's nothing that says he wrote it, nothing.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, but the note was torn into 28 pieces. Only 27 were recovered, and not only did it not have a signature on this typewritten letter, but it didn't even have any fingerprints. So someone put on
Right.
gloves to rip it up. And why would you rip up a note that you're writing to leave to allegedly, I guess, his family or his friends or whatever? The other thing I found very strange about the death of Vince Foster, and this was revealed in the book, The Strange Death of Vince Foster by Christopher Ruddy, the only photograph that survived from the crime scene, as we're told, the 35 millimeter photographs that were taken were fogged in the developing, basically ruined by exposing them to light in the developing room. Now, this is about the most amateur mistake that a first-year photo student in high school might make once, but I find it extremely difficult to believe that a professional photographer of any skill at all would make that type of error, particularly in a crime lab where they're dealing with evidence. But one of, if not the only photo to survive, was a Polaroid that was taken of Vince Foster with this revolver and his thumb through the trigger. Now, one of the things that Christopher Ruddy did in the writing of his book was he contacted a former U.S. Army investigator and a former NYPD homicide investigator, and both of those gentlemen said that between the two of them, they've investigated something on the order of 30 gun-in-mouth suicides. And although they didn't say this outcome would be impossible, they did say in every single one of those other cases, they never saw an instance where the gun remained in the dead guy's hand, because the explosive recoil of the gun being fired, coupled with the fact that the shooter was dead, caused the gun to go flying, not to stay there hanging around in the person's hand.
Right. Well, it was that photograph that was shown on Nightline by Ted Koppel that triggered me. Of course, I worked with Chris on that book, and it was that photograph that came up on Nightline that made me call Ambrose Evans Pritchard. I called him at 2 o'clock thereabout in the morning, Washington time. I said, Ambrose, you got to go and turn on your computer. And he was still drowsy, and he said, what's going on? I said, just turn it on. He went, turned on his computer, and he said, what am I seeing? I said, look at the picture. You've probably got the picture pulled up, but look at it. And if you look, you will see what appears to be gold and brown, etc., leaves all on the ground.
Yeah.
Around the hand.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is with that photograph, he killed himself, I think it was like July, right?
Yeah, July 19th, I think.
All right. Now, Chris Ruddy went to the actual site where he killed himself there on the berm.
Yeah.
And Chris told me that it was very well manicured, everything was taken care of. But the main thing is in July, you don't have leaves that have fallen off the trees. That happens in the fall. How did those leaves get in that picture? That picture was staged, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Oh, yeah.
And they even screwed up, as Chris found from the people, the experts he contacted. If you look at the picture and look at the thumb, he's actually, where that thumb is, if that were true, he couldn't have pulled the trigger that way. He couldn't have. So, yes, it was all bogus. Now, here again, I don't think necessarily to go back and rehash the death of Vince Foster and all these others, other than to say that was a death, supposedly of suicide, which, as you can tell, most of the true information about it does not lead one to believe it was suicide.
Right.
But if they can do that to somebody like Vince Foster at as high a level as he is or was, and remember, he was the highest official to have died other than Kennedy at that time.
Right.
If they
Under
can pull
strange
the wool over the
circumstances,
country,
yeah.
right, if they can pull the wool over the country's eyes on that, why on earth would anybody listening to me now have any doubt that if they wanted to construct a cover-up to kill Epstein, how hard would that be?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's even more obvious to people now because I talk to people who, would consider you or I to be conspiracy theorists, and they don't believe that Epstein killed himself. Everybody thinks Epstein was killed, who I speak to. And that's very strange because it's interesting to see who gets red-pilled by what, Larry. As I've been doing the shows on Crowdsource the Truth, I'm meeting all kinds of people who cover all kinds of topics. Some people, they woke up when the JFK assassination happened. Some people, it was 9/11. Some people, it was the Las Vegas shooting. Some people, it's something like this. People are telling us that Epstein was a Mossad operative. That all may be true, but at a certain point, you go from being an asset to a liability, and that's when the button gets pushed, right?
And when you go making a claim that if you go down, people are going to go down with you, that is probably one of the dumbest things you can possibly do in a position like Epstein was in.
Yeah.
You're not thinking when you do that, because you are sealing your fate. You think you're scaring people to help you. But at that level, that's what I say, if we don't understand this game, at that level, those people, you scare them, but you scare them in ways that might not come out the way you want.
Yeah. It was very stupid, for sure.
He did it to himself. Yes.
Now,
but as far as you and I are concerned, as far as I'm concerned, I can only tell you my opinion, that's all it is, my opinion, is that he is dead and he didn't commit suicide. They killed him.
Right.
The details of it, I don't know.
Right. And there's people who remain unconvinced. That's fine. There's going to be more evidence to come out. Now, Larry, I know you're not a big YouTube viewer, but there is a guy who's going by the name Rusty Shackelford, which of course is it's got to be a pseudonym, I would presume. It's the name of a cartoon character on King of the Hill. But for the past several weeks, Rusty Shackelford has been flying what appears to be a consumer drone, like a DJI Mavic or something like that, just flying it over the island and giving the world some unprecedented views of some of the buildings and the sites around the island, really raising more questions than providing answers. But at this point, this is all we can do. Today, he's posted a video, or perhaps yesterday, he's posted a video that shows NYPD officers and FBI agents inside what appeared to be an office on Epstein Island, Little St. James. We can see individuals moving around inside there looking for things. They're wearing NYPD jackets, they're wearing FBI jackets. And I think people are pleased that this is happening, but in my view, this is a waste of time and just maybe a distraction to make people think that something is happening, because this island has been sitting there for weeks since Epstein was arrested. We've seen groundskeepers, construction workers, evidence destroyers, whatever they might be. They've been walking around this island totally unabated. In my mind, and I have no law enforcement. The cops clearly see the drone. They're looking out the window, calling on a radio. There's a drone outside. And I mean, even without any investigative background, it seems obvious to me that if you're going to arrest somebody rich, powerful, with a huge staff, you're going to want to go to this island maybe the same exact day you arrest him, or at the moment you arrest him, so that you gather all the evidence?
Of course. Of course. Let's look at, for example, Roger Stone. What did they do to him? They blitzkrieged into his house and took everything. What did they do with Trump's attorney, the one that turned on him? What did they do? They go in, they take everything. And you're telling me they left that island?
For weeks.
Alone? For weeks? I mean, get real.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it seems ridiculous.
And it just adds to the mystery. And what I fear is the magic of the mystery may have struck some people, some of us, from being sober as we think about what actually happened. You know, there's reason enough to go nutbag with conspiracy stuff. There truly is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting because, Larry, we've seen this FBI memo that's just been released saying that conspiracy theories may be cause for domestic terrorism or something like that. But this seems to be an actual conspiracy, even if it's just Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They were in a conspiracy to go, round up a bunch of 14-year-old girls and pay them money to be sex slaves, essentially. But in this shot, we can see through the window several NYPD, FBI. I guess they're going through computers on this island, but I'm not really necessarily satisfied that they're doing a very good job investigating this. It's quite disappointing.
Well, I'll tell you who should be concerned. As I have been told, there are three women that helped Epstein facilitate the young girls. And they have not been found.
Well, Ghislaine Maxwell we know about.
Well, there's three they cannot find. I don't know who they are. Was not told who they were.
Huh. So that was one
of
your...
those women...
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That was one of your sources that told you that? That's not public info?
No, that's not to my knowledge, it's not. I guess it is now. But...
Well, no, it was interesting that you say that because, yesterday I had on the program, I had former Palm Beach County Sheriff's Deputy John Mark Dugan, and he presented me with a document that was a fax from the Palm Beach Police Department to Barry Krischer, who was the state attorney at the time in 2006. And he opens the letter by saying, "Dear Mr. Krischer, please find enclosed the probable cause affidavits and case filing packages thus far resulting from the Palm Beach Police Department's investigation of Jeffrey Epstein and name redacted and name redacted." So there are two people here that this doesn't look like it would be big enough space to fit the name Ghislaine Maxwell in either of these. So here's two people that have been redacted in this fax that I have from the chief of police.
Well, I have been told that they are in grave jeopardy.
Who is?
If the three women that have not been found yet.
Right.
And if they were smart, they would turn themselves over to Barr now.
Start saying.
And let them protect them.
But the thing is, Larry, doesn't anybody in that
Uh-huh.
situation look at Epstein in the federal prison where they think he's in custody, and they're going to think, I'm going to get killed if I say anything, right? We've got Hope in the USA telling us Nadia, Sarah, and Ghislaine. Do any of those names ring any bells?
I can't tell you. I can't say. I'm just telling you, they need to be aware that their lives aren't worth a lot right now. Now, I understand if I were one of those, by the way, which I have been one like that myself. I know it's a scary situation. You don't know who to trust. And you certainly don't believe that the FBI is going to protect you.
Yeah.
Because you probably feel like they're probably players in the thing. So
Yeah.
I know that they are probably scared, but running loose as they are, they're not long for this world. And although they probably can't 1,000,000% feel safe turning themselves over to Barr, that at least gives them a chance.
Yeah.
Where they are now, they have no chance. None.
And people are also talking about Rachel Chandler. Rachel Chandler is sort of a social media influencer and was definitely photographed with Bill Clinton on a jet that is alleged to be Jeffrey Epstein's jet. I don't know, obviously she's a witness or a victim,
Right.
or it's hard to say what her role was, but yeah, I'm curious to
There
know.
are three. I will leave it at this. There are three women that are known by Barr in his office, that are known to have been intermediaries. in setting up targets for Epstein directly. I mean, they were immediate players. And the stories they can tell could be awfully damaging for some serious people, very serious people.
Right.
And
Well, Larry,
I've just heard,
yeah.
by the way, I don't know if it's true, saw it on Fox, I think, just when I came in. Apparently there is someone who was writing a book, I guess, about Epstein, and supposedly Epstein gave him a list of some of the people that are in his so-called, I guess, black book. But he was never to reveal them until Epstein told him he could, and supposedly this journalist guy is claiming he's going to release them. And so I don't know where that's going to lead.
Well, that's stupid, because if he claims that and doesn't just release it, he's very much like that person who told you to delay their Bill Clinton expose interview until Monday and then died on Saturday. I don't think it's ever a good idea to hype your release of
Right.
damaging information like this. We've got a viewer here on Twitch who claims to have the unredacted black book. Volpix199, if that's true, email it to me, please. truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org. It'll leak on 4chan, somebody says. I don't know if we can trust these things. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people trying to insert disinformation, false information, people trying to do things to invalidate evidence and just introduce confusion, get everybody fatigued over this whole thing, because we're outside the realm of justice. We're outside the realm of the law. We're dealing with a political disinformation campaign that's designed. This is damage control, isn't it, Larry?
Yes, and I would say, my opinion, to the person that sent you that, you're lying.
Well,
You
they
don't
might have
have it.
something that they think is that, but someone might have tricked them.
Well, yeah, but I'm telling you that that's not true. Whether he knows it or he doesn't matters little to me. You just have to know, folks, that the contents of the people Epstein was working with and making connections with, etc., they're not loose with that stuff. That stuff is not something that Epstein or anybody else would play fast and loose with. They just wouldn't.
Yeah. Gawker seems to have made some release here of it. I think a lot of our viewers are all over this information. Everybody wants to know more about this, Larry, because not only does Jeffrey Epstein represent the most horrendous type of criminal, he's so connected to so many of the most powerful people in governments around the world. This is really, in so many ways, such an unprecedented case. I don't know that any of us can really fully absorb the importance and the impact of this yet, and we're really still just at the beginning of it. Even though this all began many years ago, we're just learning details with each passing day. I just before the show began, I had a conversation with Nicholas Biazzi, who is he's the public information officer for the Department of Justice here in the Southern District of New York, and he directed me to the official press release on the DOJ's website, which basically just says Epstein is dead, came out on Saturday, and they've said nothing more about it since then. Mr. Biazzi had no further comment on that. I asked him specifically if it was true that Epstein was in jail with that former police officer who was like an extremely muscle-bound, like almost looked like the Incredible Hulk. The guy was like a super bodybuilder or something. And Mr. Biazzi declined to comment if there was a cellmate or not. So it's interesting to see how these public information officers aren't necessarily there to give out information to the public, but potentially to control the information that the public has access to. And I mean, this guy looks like he could kill almost any person with his bare hands. He's a remarkably muscular individual, and I certainly would be frightened to be in a jail cell, as I think anybody would with this guy.
Right. Well, let me tell you what I worry about, Jason, and it's maybe a little bit off topic here. But I have reason to believe, based off information that I have, that we're very close, Jason, to riots and trouble in this country like we have never seen before. The word that I'm given to be aware of is Soros is outfitting a riot from, I'm going to call them Antifa, I don't know what you call, but anyway, on one side will be Antifa, on the other side will be supposedly conservative Trump people, MAGA people. The trick is that it's all staged. The MAGA people are actually Soros-paid people as well. But it's designed to take this nation and put us into the next level, which is confrontations all over the country, riots, especially during the month of August in major cities. It's designed to make it explode, to break down the system. Now, if that comes to pass, which I believe it will, and very soon, when that kind of activity starts, the Epstein story is going to be pushed way back. People will lose interest.
Right.
So I'm going to bet that the people that are immediately involved with Epstein that don't want their names and information to come out are certainly just waiting, biding time until that happens, because they know when that breaks out, they're safe. It'll go away.
Yeah.
It will go away. But up until then, this is going to be the story that has everybody going nuts. And the conspiracy stuff is just going to explode. And there's nothing here I can do about it. It's going to.
Well, I think people appreciate what you're doing by sharing your knowledge, your experience, these insights, and just joining me for these conversations every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Larry, we've got over 1,400 people watching us right now, and I hope that some of those people will find time to go and visit nicholslive.com. Click on the donate button and send some money to Larry. It's important that you do that to keep Larry coming back. If you enjoy listening to what he's telling us, the information that he provides, it's important that you get onto nicholslive.com and use Larry's PayPal address, nicholslive@aol.com. Send him some money over PayPal, even if it's just $5 or $10. You can also stick a $5 or $10 bill or a $20 bill or a $100 bill, stick it in an envelope and mail it over to Larry in Conway, Arkansas. It's important that people support the guests that I bring on to Crowdsource the Truth. And if you enjoy watching the show, it's important that you become a sponsor of Crowdsource the Truth. Crowdsource the Truth is an independently sponsored news source, and it's sponsored by you. The reason I do that is so that we can make sure that billionaire financial interests like Google and their advertisers don't have undue influence over the information that we can bring you. This video is not monetized on the main Crowdsource the Truth channel, and frankly, if I try to monetize it, it's almost guaranteed that YouTube will say no. So the only way this type of information keeps coming out is if you, the viewers, sponsor it. Become a micro-sponsor of Larry, of Crowdsource the Truth, the different guests that I have on, and help us keep bringing this information to you. Larry, thank you so much for joining me again today. Lots of interesting stories.
Let me say this to your audience, folks. With the things that are coming, with what's fixing to happen to the social media, the internet, with Google and all of them, the importance of keeping this program on the air has never been greater. Never. I assure you, the things that I bring, and I'm certain Jason does it with all of his guests, the things I bring you, it's not hearsay. It's not guessing. It's the truth as best I know it to be. But it can't go anywhere if we don't have this program. So please, you know, Jason, I got $40 in the mail the other day from one of your listeners. It was so much appreciated, but I will say this to all of you. If you just have a limited amount of funds and you can't support Jason and me or any of his guests, please first support this program. Keep it on the air. Very soon you will recognize the importance of this program and what you're doing by keeping it alive and going. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Larry. I appreciate that. I really do. I appreciate your endorsement, and I appreciate all of our generous sponsors. I want to thank everybody for watching us today. Tonight at 8:30 p.m., I'll be back with more pain. Michael Moore of True Pundit going to have some more insights from, I won't say who, but sources that know what's going on inside that Municipal Correction Center, downtown Manhattan, right across from the Moynihan Courthouse, where Jeffrey Epstein allegedly committed suicide. Don't miss that tonight, only on Patreon and Subscribestar. Larry, thanks for another great show. I'll see you next week.
Sounds great, buddy.